Hey everyone, and welcome to the third E3 Digital Foundry videocast. We've previously covered topics before the show, the Microsoft conference, and now we're going Sony. And to talk to me about it, the man who was there at the event, John Linneman.
Rich, how's it going? I managed to survive. It was quite an experience, let me tell you.
Yeah, it seemed to me you were being sort of shunted between different sheds. It's kind of bizarre experience there. Why don't you tell us more about that before we start talking games?
Yeah, so they told us beforehand, like, oh yeah, there's not going to be capture there. And I was like, okay, why is that? Well, the reason is because they like to move us around between different rooms. And, you know, we lined up, we go into this first room, and it looks like a wedding banquet hall, but like evil. There's like lights hanging everywhere, like creepy Last of Us sounds playing. And then they actually start showing the game. And that's when it gets interesting, because the first scene in it was the same room we were in. It's kind of a mess with your head moment. And then, you know, we'll talk about that in a second, but then after that was finished, they pretty much said, all right guys, go out this door. And we start walking through these Japanese looking gardens, and obviously, you know, we're going over to Ghost of Tsushima, which, yes, that was exactly right. So we go into this massive theater with this huge, like, ultra wide screen. It was basically three 16 by 9 screens put together. So, but yeah, and then we got to spend the rest of the conference there, mercifully, because, you know, our newsmen on site, Tom and Wes, they had their laptops, and, you know, the first room was standing only, so trying to juggle your laptop in a standing room, the only spot, not great.
Yeah, not too good at all. Yeah, very interesting situation you had there. We had some kind of between room show on the live stream, so there are a bunch of talking heads talking about stuff and recapping and whatnot. All very strange, and it was a bit of a strange conference all around, I thought, simply because, well, essentially we had the 4 tentpole games that they were, you know, trailing before the show, a couple of announcements, and I'll tell you what, John, it seems to me like it was like a kind of extended Nintendo Direct with some filmed inserts, and it was weird. I'm not sure it's really what I would want from an E3 media briefing.
Yeah, I can kind of agree with that. It did feel very like a Nintendo Direct, except for, you know, Sean getting up there at the beginning. Though I'm starting to suspect that he doesn't really like getting up on stage all that much, because since he's taken over, it's just been this constant push to just do more and more straight video on the screen. But hey, at least what they showed was pretty amazing, actually. There was a lot of really great looking stuff there. And I think starting with The Last of Us 2 was kind of, it looks really good. Like, Naughty Dog obviously really pushed the tech with Uncharted 4, and this is clearly a step up to the point where people were like, wait, is that really PS4?
Well, the initial area, the initial scene that we saw was, you know, I'm guessing it was a real-time engine-driven cutscene. That's what Naughty Dog are doing these days. But it looked CG. It looked awesome.
Yeah, it did. But then when they actually cut to the gameplay, I was kind of even more impressed there, because just the level of detail on display and the lighting, the indirect lighting in particular, like with the original, they really kind of pioneered their techniques on handling indirect lighting, because the world is ruined, so there's not a lot of direct illumination. So they've really pushed that here with this game. But then just the quality of the materials and like the detail in every scene. And I think the most impressive aspect is the animation. Like, they really went all the way with this super fluid animation blending. So, like, you know, obviously the big scene I think in there is when they show her just moving along the wall and seamlessly grab like a bottle or a can from the wall, throw it in an enemy and keep going. You see the little circle prompt pop up, but the way they're able to seamlessly blend that animation, it looked absolutely phenomenal. And, you know, I actually had a very brief moment to compliment Neil Druckmann himself, because it turned out he was sitting right behind us at the thing, so that was interesting. But yeah, him and the team, they're doing, the tech team in Naughty Dog, once again, I mean, they're just basically the best there is right now.
Yeah, I thought it was an absolutely incredible piece of technology on show there. A couple of things that stood out to me, beyond the rendering, which I'm sure we're going to be spending days, if not weeks, analyzing at some point. But to begin with, I think they've taken melee combat to a new level. The context-sensitive animations and the reactions that Ellie had there. It was kind of like, you know, cinema grade phytography, if you like. It was just really seamless. It looked brilliant. And the way the camera was moving around in melee combat as well, it was just awesome. Absolutely phenomenal. So that was the first thing that I picked up on there, which I think is game-changing there. I can't wait to physically play it to see how that feels and the extent to which that it's that it works as a control system and that you kind of still feel in control. Because if you look at it, it kind of looks QTE level, you know, in terms of the choreography, if you like. It looks pre-rendered almost in terms of those animations. My guess is that they've cracked it and that it isn't, you know, that it is actually, you know, the player fully in control. If that's the case, awesome. The second thing that I thought was really interesting, which I was hoping to see actually in the first Last of Us, it didn't really materialize, but it does look as though they've cracked it for this one. Enemy AI. When Ellie is being stalked, the AI actually looks convincing, you know, and the reactions when she's discovered, and the way that the enemies are kind of communicating with one another, it feels authentic. And I think that's one of the first times in games where I've seen that kind of pack behavior actually realized, actually authentic, and I'm buying into it. That's the first time, I think. I thought it was quite phenomenal.
Yeah, and that's, you know, obviously being an E3 demo, that's the kind of thing you want to make sure looks perfect on camera. We saw it kind of with Last of Us 1, but where they did the E3 demo there, so I'll be very interested to see if they can actually nail it like we saw in this demo with the final product, because you're right, it looks extremely natural right now in a way that was kind of surprising.
Yeah, in the first Last of Us, when you saw the way Ellie and Joel interacted in combat, I kind of thought they might have sort of cracked that AI puzzle at that point, but it didn't really materialize in the final game. But here, you know, it does, you know, in terms of the enemy behaviors and the patterns and whatnot, it really did look impressive. And I mean, it's great that we're seeing that kind of attention to detail in stuff that isn't graphics related, that has fundamental impact on gameplay.
But then, obviously, another one that almost is kind of about the visuals is the next game we saw, which was Ghosts of Tsushima, which is the next big Sucker Punch product. And this is interesting because I think Sucker Punch was one of the first developers this generation to really showcase what could be done with the hardware, right? Like Infamous Second Son looked absolutely phenomenal when it launched. And they've been working on this for quite some time, to the point where Tom Phillips whispers over to me and be like, yeah, there's no way this is current gen, but I kind of feel like it might be based on what they've done with the past. Like this, it feels like a nice evolution of their technology, and it just looks so. This is the first time, I guess, Sucker Punch has attempted sort of a large, I almost say Witcher-esque world, even though it's, you know, ancient Japan, but the large fields of grass and like complex trees, and just the way the grass blows in the wind and the sun shines off of it, and just the animation work. I think you just watch that video and it really starts to feel like, yeah, they're going to have quite a hit on their hands with this game.
Yeah, I think the one thing that did count against it, though, was that it was a third-person action game that followed up from what is probably going to become one of the greatest third-person action games of this generation. So, you know, from my perspective, the animation wasn't quite as good, the facial animation, you know, given any kind of comparison with any other game, Sucker Punch's work there would be absolutely phenomenal. But coming directly after The Last of Us, I don't think that comparison did them any favors, even though the game actually looked really, really impressive. And yeah, it was more about, I feel, the world that they've created there, and also the kind of stylistic flourishes. Now, The Last of Us is a kind of grim, dark world couched in the darkest of realities. And yeah, with Ghosts, well, I think we've got a much more stylized presentation there, perhaps drawing more sort of inspiration from the old kind of samurai movies and the kind of artistic look peculiar to that genre. And yeah, I thought it was a really arresting looking game. Wasn't, you know, I guess we're just seeing a tiny slice of gameplay there. So much more to come, I feel. But yeah, there were some interesting things there. Obviously, Sucker Punch, they really were pioneering facial motion capture in Infamous, and I think that game would still hold up today, actually. And in terms of, you know, what Tom was saying about, yeah, no way this is current gen, well, maybe it's a cross-gen game, but, you know, I guess we'll see about that.
Yeah, I mean, the one last thing I wanted to mention is I love what they were doing with the leaf particles. It sort of reminded me of the Batman Arkham City, I think it was, where they had the NVIDIA-specific features for particles on the ground. So here it was like you fight in a field filled with leaves, and as they're fighting and shuffling around on the ground, the leaves are kind of kicking up around them in such a way that just looked excellent.
I guess PSX Experience in December, hopefully we'll get to see a bit more on that one.
Yeah, precisely. So let's see, after that then, the one that sticks out to me is Control, which is interesting. So they started to show this trailer and it looked completely bananas, but I recognized some of the rendering features of Northlight, and I whispered over to Wes, I was like, oh, this has got to be the Remedy game, and it was. And you know, there's not a lot to say about it yet because it was a pretty short trailer, but I can just say, you know, as a huge fan of their work, I'm very happy to see that they're still producing what looks like interesting games, single-player games like that. And this one looks even crazier than usual, just with all of the morphine sort of scenery. So that is one I'm going to be watching out on. And if you noticed, it was interesting because it's like now they're showing this on the Sony stage, which is kind of the first time that Remedy's really shown a game at a PlayStation conference like this.
So, you know, you have to wonder what happened after Quantum Break there.
Exactly.
But yeah, I agree. A huge fan of Remedy, and obviously on the PC side of things, they've been doing work with RTX with NVIDIA, so fingers crossed that we'll see some ray tracing action on that one as well.
Yeah, and then I think after that was, again, I kind of called this just from seeing the frame rate and the way the rendering looks, was Resident Evil 2. So we've known about this remake for a while, and they actually announced it right when they started production on it. So it's kind of amazing how fast they're able to finish this game. Well, it's not finished yet, but it comes out early 2019, so they're closing in, and I think it looked phenomenal. I mean, it's 60 frames per second. It's a beautiful, sort of recaptures the look of the original game. You can still see some of the scenery and the models. It looks like your mind would think it would look based on those old pre-renders. So yeah, for myself, I'm very excited to see what they do there. And in fact, the trailer they showed at the conference, there was a second trailer released online that shows even more gameplay and sort of scenery from the original game, which looked excellent. So, and it's cool that they're using I guess the RE engine again that was powering Resident Evil 7, and I presume that that's also the case with Devil May Cry 5. So that seems to be their new, I guess, MT framework replacement.
Yeah, not Pantaray then.
Correct, exactly.
So after this, would I be right in saying that we moved on to another big tentpole game, which was Death Stranding?
Yeah, there may have been a couple little interludes that I'm forgetting, but that was the big one. And this is the first time we've gotten, I want to say a taste of the gameplay, but I'm not even sure that was the case. Like clearly it was real time this time. And you know, I'm sure it was rendered with the in-game engine before, but this time it really looked like, okay, this is what I would expect to see while playing the game. And yeah, so it showed a lot of walking across mountains, which Tom was thinking, oh, is that just the game? But I suspect it's more Kojima and his love of cinema sort of shining through and trying to showcase a journey to the location, basically. And then, yeah, I'm really not sure what to make of the game yet, but it's Decima again, so it's, you know, the engine that Guerrilla Games developed for Horizon, used in a very different way. It's a very dark, strange looking world that they've crafted, but it's very detailed. The lighting was excellent, I feel, especially the indirect illumination. It just looked phenomenal. But I do think it looks good, but it is a little weird when you come back from like The Last of Us 2 or even Ghost of Tsushima. it doesn't maybe quite stack up to those as much as I would have expected.
Yeah, I think it's because we didn't actually see much in the way of what you're actually supposed to do in the game, apart from a lot of walking. But, you know, I loved the character rendering. I thought the handling of materials, the very natural looking lighting that they've got going on there. It was actually quite interesting to compare it with the super stylized visuals that you get with Horizon Zero Dawn, which is running on the same engine. So you can kind of see the parallels in terms of you know, similarities between Horizon and Death Stranding owing to that commonality in technology, but at the same time what they're doing with the technology on Death Stranding, certainly in terms of I think creating much more of a sort of believable, more realistic world. That was fascinating, and the character rendering, it's kind of bizarre because you know, Hideo Kojima is a man of my generation. In fact, you know, I think he's 5 or 6 years older than I am. So I can imagine the younger generation at the end when Lindsay Wagner turns around for a slow motion reveal. I can imagine them going, "What? Why?" Whereas, you know, for me and Kojima, it's like, wow, she was like one of the iconic actresses of American television in the 70s when I was growing up and when he was a little bit older. And it's you know, it's like a perfect recreation of how she was circa 1977. It's absolutely bizarre, but this is, you know, this is what he does. You know, he's got carte blanche now since he's left Konami to pursue any kind of vision that he wants, and that was kind of mind-blowing. That was even more of a kind of surprise moment than the kind of bizarre entrapped babies that Daryl off The Walking Dead is carrying about.
There's a good chance that we're going to be looking at like Metal Gear Solid 4 times a million with this. Like it's just going completely all out in crazy directions. So yeah, I mean, we'll see how that actually turns out in terms of what it plays like, but at least we know that the tech and the rendering quality is top notch.
So where do we go after that? I guess it would be Spider-Man?
There may have been a couple other little things, but yeah, I think Spider-Man was the big one from there, and it was the first time we sort of had a look at what appears to be more of a bespoke level, if you will, where they fly offshore, and there's this whole facility to play around on. And so the demo looked brilliant, but you know, there was a lot of what looked like quick-timey event sequences and things that seemed a little bit overly cinematic. But after the fact, I know that Wes got the chance to play it, and hearing his description, you know, clearly they made that video to really showcase the cinematic nature of it, but when you're actually playing, it's very fluid. The controls sound great, so I'm not too worried about that. But visually speaking, I think, yeah, it's Insomniac's finest work, and it's a clear evolution of what they started with Sunset Overdrive.
I just can't really add too much to that. I just think that the quality of the presentation there, the way everything hangs together, the post-process pipeline, the 4K effect that they're doing on PlayStation 4 Pro. I mean, it's not 4K, but it might as well be. It's an absolutely brilliant piece of work. Something that sort of impressed me as a Spider-Man fan is simply that they're taking the original source material, but they're putting their own spin on it. So all of the Rogues Gallery, the Spider-Man Rogues Gallery, and obviously, of course, the costume itself, they've completely, they've just done their own spin on it. They've just, created characters that we recognize, but are very, very different. So it feels fresh at the same time. And also the kind of sense of Spider-Man as, just this super flexible, super agile, super strong character. They're capturing that beautifully, not just through the animation and the QTEs, if they are QTEs, but just again in the camera direction, the way they're doing that. So I just think it's going to be a massive, massive hit. I'm not seeing anything there which is raising any red flags at the moment. So yeah, amazing stuff there, I think.
I kind of feel like that's kind of holds true for all of their first-party lineup here. I mean, you just look at the quality bar that these guys are hitting. I mean, every one of these studios is producing stuff that is just, it's on another level in terms of production quality, and it's clear that Sony is investing a lot of money into these projects. And after a lot of their recent successes, I mean, it's difficult to argue. God of War was huge, and you know, it's just one of many first-party games that have really nailed it. So clearly this formula of investing a lot of money and talent into these studios is paying off. And yeah, I mean, I can't wait to see the final products of each of these games. And for Spider-Man, at least we don't have to wait too long.
I'm just trying to think of the last time we actually had serious criticisms of a Sony first-party title. And I'm struggling, I'll be honest with you. They've just been consistent, and I think that's what users really want. You know, they want to have a console where they're going to be getting exclusive games, where they know that the quality bar is there, where you can safely pre-order if that's your bag, knowing that, you know, it's a slam dunk. And you know, I've got a lot of criticisms of last night's presentation. What isn't a criticism is the quality of the software, which is just phenomenal from start to finish.
Absolutely. But you know, the software looked great. The conference was super weird, but I still kind of enjoyed it. So overall, I think they did a pretty good job. And in fact, I'd say both Microsoft and Sony delivered interesting conference experiences this year, and they both showed a lot of great stuff. So yeah, I'm pretty happy with what we got this year. It was more exciting than I expected.
Yeah, I think, well, Microsoft kind of shook off the perception they don't have any games, which I think is really important. And Sony just hammered home what they're good at. Now, what I do think they were lacking is theatre. You know, you go to E3, you want a spectacle, you want a show.
Well, we got Gustavo with his, you know.
But yeah, you know, you want that monster reveal. You know, there are some classic ones, obviously. You've recently covered the 2003 Halo 2 demo. That was an iconic E3 moment. Another one that I would say would be the reveal of Xbox One back compat. Just completely came out of nowhere, and you just thought it wouldn't be possible. Classic E3 moment. Yeah, it really did just strike me as a glorified Nintendo Direct there.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't get those the E3 2015 Year of Dreams moments, you know, when the Last Guardian, Final Fantasy VII, and Shenmue 3 all materialized. Of course, Shenmue 3 and FF7 are still kind of MIA.
So yeah, obviously Sony has the PSX experience in December. I'm kind of curious about what they're actually going to show, because, you know, the elephant in the room obviously is PlayStation 5. And you know, there's a reason why they can't announce new games, and the reason why is presumably, you know, the likes of Horizon 2 and whatnot, there's a strong suggestion that they're going to be, you know, PlayStation 5 titles. And if they are, they can't really announce them for a piece of hardware that officially doesn't exist yet. So the question is when they can confirm when that hardware is actually going to land. So yeah, I kind of was half expecting a next-gen reveal of some description, maybe even a hint, just like what Phil Spencer did at the Microsoft briefing. But there was nothing there. And to be fair, Sony are in market leadership position, so they don't really have to. One thing which kind of did sort of confuse me just a tad, there was not one single mention that I could pick up on of PlayStation 4 Pro.
That's a good point. Well, they didn't really mention the hardware, period. It was completely just focused on the games, and you know, they never specified platforms for any of this stuff, which is why you could think also, oh yeah, cross-gen. It was just, here's the games.
Okay then, well, I think that's where we're going to leave things for now. Thanks for joining me on this one, as always, John.
Thanks very much, Richard. I'm still here doing this guerrilla-style shooting in the hotel, but we have a busy day today. I'm going to see some cool stuff like Cyberpunk, among many, many others, so yeah.
Well, I look forward to hearing about that. But in the meantime, please do like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video, and please do consider supporting the Digital Foundry Patreon, where we have a ton of E3 material available in pristine 4K, and it's awesome. And yes, if you are a subscriber of the Digital Foundry channel, please ring the bell to ensure that you don't miss a thing. But that's all from us for now. Thanks for watching.